Hey, welcome back, music lovers. Is episode number 3 of Matt and Sheryl's GenExcellent playlist. I'm Matt.
I'm Sheryl.
And today we enter a new year, 1974. Our playlist so far through 2 episodes has reached 3 songs. Started with American Pie from 1972, and then our 1973 selections, Tie Yellow Ribbon Around the Old Oak Tree by Tony Orlando and Dawn, and Killing Me Softly with his song by Roberta Flack. We're sticking with hits right now. Come episode 4, we'll start to bring in our personal favorites and a little teaser. They're both big hits as well from 74. That'll be episode 4. Today we're taking 2 big hits from 74, though. Both songs that I like quite a bit. Both songs I think that fit great in a party playlist. One is a proto-disco classic called Rock Your Baby by George McRae. And the other is The Joker, which was Steve Miller's breakthrough hit single in 1974, actually released late 73, but was number 1 hit in the USA. And then years down the line came a big hit elsewhere because of its use in a Levi's ad. We've seen that, I don't know how far back that's been happening in Britain in particular. And Levi's has caused a number of old songs to re-enter the charts and hit the top of the charts in England. That's just one of many examples. I think in the early 90s, they used the Joker on an ad, and next thing you know, it's hitting the top of the charts. You don't see that happen.
Oh, okay. That's why it went back in the charts. I didn't know what happened, but that makes sense. So that it's definitely something that, I mean, there are a lot of songs that I have memories of from the 80s that were from commercials. Like, I didn't really know the song maybe that well from, the radio or a song, but I definitely had heard it in a commercial, and that's where it's in my musical memory.
Well, it's fun. It's happened many, many, many times in England. Rarely happens in the United States, where an older song becomes popular again to the point where it's, number 1
back
or
in
threatening.
the charts. Yeah.
But we just had one recently with Kate Bush, and that was not a hit. She had never had a hit in the classic sense in the United States.
Yeah.
But Running Up That Hill, because of its use in Stranger Things,
right,
all of a sudden became this phenomenon and is selling big again and is charting on Billboard in the top 10. I don't know
the same thing happened with Master of Puppets, too, for Metallica.
Oh, I did not know that.
From
Stranger Things?
From Stranger Things, yeah. I mean, it didn't hit number 1, I don't think, but it definitely, it became really popular after that.
Yeah.
And actually, going back to the commercial thing, the one that really sticks out in my mind from the 80s was Good Vibrations, the Sunkist commercial.
I don't remember that.
I mean, I'd heard that song before, but I wasn't a fan. It was like a surfer, and they had the big wave coming.
That's so funny you bring that up, because I was just talking about this with somebody the other day. Now, on my mom's side of the family, like my cousin Brian is president of the regional bottling co-op for Pepsi. So I grew up in a Pepsi family. I was basically nursed on Pepsi. So I tried all the Pepsi products known to man, and I was reminiscing about how. Do you remember something called Pepsi Free?
Yeah,
from the late 70s. It was like Diet Pepsi, but it had like a little like lemon flavor in it.
I think it was caffeine free too. That's why
it may have been.
Yeah.
And then I think they pulled it off the market. It probably had something to cause cancer in it, so it wasn't on store shelves for very long.
Things in the 80s that they found out later.
And then when I was working in market research in the 90s, that's when Pepsi came out with Pepsi Clear. Do you remember that? And then and then SNL did the
clear gravy
parody, right?
Yes, I love that.
But the one Pepsi product that I fondly remember the most, I think, was Sunkist Natural, and it came in a green can. It was orange soda, but it was mandarin orange flavor, and it was really good. I don't know how long it was on the market, not long, but it was good. I loved it.
I don't know. I'll have to see if Sunkist still exists.
But we digress. Instead of talking about soda pop, we're supposed to be talking about music. So what's been spinning around your way lately? What have you been listening to a lot lately?
Oh, well, I've actually been listening to an album from a band I really have never paid attention to. They're a prog band called Caravan.
Was that meant to be a disclaimer? Are you warning people in advance? Oh, prog.
Maybe. We haven't had enough episodes yet, I don't think, for people to realize that I'm kind of a big prog fanatic. And
we are slowly opening ourselves up so people can see what's ticking in there. Sheryl's.
Yeah.
I am too. I have
Yeah.
just an incredibly broad musical taste. I listen to everything.
Me too. Yeah.
But I do have a soft spot for prog rock.
Yeah, and I don't know a lot of people, I guess, that really like this music, so that's why it may have sounded a bit like a disclaimer. But this album, so Caravan was part of the Canterbury scene in England, which was sort of like a music collective, I guess you could say. The most famous bands that came out of that, I mean, famous in the prog world, were Soft Machine, Gong, Camel, and Caravan. And a bunch of them actually started from this band called the Wildflowers. A large majority of Soft Machine and Caravan both came from that band. Kevin Ayers and Robert Wyatt, who were in Soft Machine, were in that band. And I don't really know a lot about Caravan, to be truthful, because I really never listened to them that much. A lot of their earlier 70s stuff is kind of more in that instrumental. I mean, they're very accomplished musicians, and I think the music is really cool. But I'm usually not a fan as much of just the instrumental music. I like vocals to be in there too.
And for folks who aren't familiar with what prog or progressive rock is, it's basically it's high musical ability. It's combining rock with like classical music, jazz music that requires a lot of technical ability. And the players are usually quite virtuosic on their instruments, and the music is rather complex, longer pieces, sometimes side-long songs, shifting time signatures, instrumental flourishes that, you got to be an accomplished musician to play. That's what progressive rock's all about.
Yeah, and bands like Yes and King Crimson.
Yes would be my favorite of the, yeah.
Yeah, me too. Pink Floyd even can fall into that category. So anyway, we're talking about a little more obscure bands here, though, with Caravan. And so this album is called For Girls Who Grow Plump in the Night, which is a really weird song title.
They had a predilection for those. They had a predilection for those slightly risque sexual allusions in their titles.
Yes, which actually I really don't care for. It's kind of annoying to me, but
Cunning Stunts, wasn't that a Caravan?
Yes.
I'm sure you loved it. I'm sure you love that one.
I know. Thanks for bringing that one up. So anyway, I have to say I've never really gravitated toward this album, maybe because of the title. I don't know. But I was looking on the Alt Music Guide, and this one gets really good reviews. And I thought, I'll go check it out. Of course, it's not on Spotify, but we have the CD. So yay, that was exciting. So
meaning you and your husband, Mike, co-owners of the Silver Platters record chain. If you want to seek out Caravan or anything else, visit any one of their 3 Puget Sound locations: Bellevue, Linwood, Soto. There you go.
Thank you, Matt. Yes.
If she's not going to promote the store, then I sure as hell will, because it's very important for me, for Silver Platters and all record stores to succeed, because that's the love of my life, is visiting these places.
And there aren't really that many left anymore.
You guys are heroes in my book.
Well, thank you. We work hard. So anyway, this album, I put it on and I am just like so pleasantly excited because not only does it have the prog leanings, it does have the long passages, the complex kind of time signatures and changes within the song, sometimes to more of like a pop feel, more of like a heavier feel. But this is a full on, I would say this is like it is prog rock pop album. There's a couple songs on here that could be pop hits. And the vocals are really cool. They've got 2 guys singing. I don't know anybody who they are or anything about them. I guess Pi Hastings is one of them.
He's the guitarist. Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's talk about the guitar he plays. I find that interesting. He plays a 12-string lead guitar on a lot of their music, which is very unusual.
Electric.
For that to be a lead guitar instrument for a rock band. The most notable example would be the Byrds with Roger McGuinn, but it's not always a lead 12-string on Byrds music. It's often kind of in the background of the mix. But I mean, when when you hear a guitar solo in Caravan, it's almost always Pye playing this lead. He plays a Fender 12, which is a really unusual instrument.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the thing that I'm most excited about this album, I guess, is just how it really incorporates a lot of different genres. Like with pop, sometimes it's really heavy. Sometimes it has the more intricate passages, the jazziness, and it's very, very cool. I wish that you would listen to it, Matt.
Well,
I'm gonna
Sheryl,
have to get a copy of the album to you.
I haven't listened to the album yet, but knowing that you were going to be talking about Caravan, I jumped onto YouTube and wow, loved it. Loved it. I watched two Caravan videos on YouTube. One was from 71. Now 71 they released in the gray and the pink. Is that what it's called? Land of Gray and Pink.
In the Land of Gray and Pink, yeah.
And I think many people consider that their best studio album. 71, my favorite year for rock music. And they were performing a song called Golf Girl on the legendary Beat Club television show, which was videotaped in Bremen, Germany. And it is a absolute mind-blowing treasure trove, music, video, ecstasy. I mean, just perfectly recorded, sonically and visually, vintage, and all these great rock bands of the era. A lot of obscure progressive bands of the era went on that show. And it was almost always recorded totally live in the studio, beautifully videotaped, beautifully preserved, beautifully recorded sound-wise. And I'm repeating myself here, but it's just, that's how important it is. But really, really cool song, really cool performance. And then a longer form video on YouTube. They're playing live at Montreux in Switzerland. And this kind of blew my mind too. So part of that Canterbury scene, I think early on, a lot of people expected Caravan to be a big success because of what you said, their pop leanings. And they see, they're obviously great musicians and playing complex music, but it was accessible too because of their melodic sense. This Montreux concert, very little vocals. I mean, it's almost all instrumental. And I'd never really listened to Caravan. I kind of had an idea in my head of what it would sound like, and they shattered my expectations. Really muscular rhythm section, kind of ballsy presentation. And then, like I said, they stand out because of the lead 12-string guitar, multiple vocalists. The bassist, one of the Sinclair brothers, is one of the vocalists, and then Pye Hastings, the guitarist, is the other main vocalist. And then this Montreux show, Richard Sinclair, who was the keyboard player, had just left the band recently. They drafted a new keyboard player. And so the whole show, you think of prog band, you think of the keyboard playing a prog band, you think of like Rick Wakeman or Keith Emerson and this whole bank of like 18 different keyboards, and there's a grand piano and an organ and 5 different synthesizers stacked up.
Wearing capes. And,
exactly. Yeah. He's playing like a I don't know if it was a Hohner or a Rhodes electric piano. That was the only keyboard he played, I think, the whole show. And then Pye Hastings just playing that Fender 12. That's the only guitar he played. Not like switching over, the double neck Gibson.
Double neck,
I mean, I had a roadie coming out with I mean, it's just those guys just kicking ass, playing great music. I loved it. I really did. I'm definitely going to explore more Caravan after seeing that.
I think you'll love this even more. And actually, one of my favorite things about it are the dual vocals, because you get the 2 different voices, which is like, I love that when bands do that.
And they're solid. They're solid vocalists.
Yeah. No, I
think
that
could be an issue with a lot of these bands.
I was going to say that's not always the case with these bands that are more focused on the instrumentals and the vocals, oftentimes a secondary.
But I was expecting something more fruity and flowery and Baroque, and I got a muscular presentation, a rockin' band with some pop smarts. And
it gets pretty heavy at times, actually.
They get funky.
Like
they get heavy. Yeah. No, I was blown away. I really, really enjoyed it. So thank you, Miss Bott, for turning me on to Caravan. I would have gotten there eventually, but you prompted me to go seek that out on YouTube, and that was a very enjoyable experience. So now the band that's been turning me on lately, and this is over a period of many months now. It's probably been more than a year since I've been obsessing on this group, and I I got to put a governor on. I got to put a limiter on because I could talk for 2 hours straight about this group without taking a breath.
That's true.
Because their story is incredible, and it is screaming out, in my opinion, for a biopic. I would love to see that happen. The band is Moby Grape, and a lot of people might recognize the name just because it's a silly name that if you heard it, you think, wow, Moby Grape, one of those dumb, dopey, acid-fueled bands of the 60s. The name aside, Moby Grape was an American band that came out of the San Francisco scene that produced Grateful Dead and Big Brother and the Holding Company, Jefferson Airplane. They were part of that same era. None of them was from the Bay Area. They came from different places. In fact, a couple of them from the Pacific Northwest. Don Stevenson, the drummer, is a Seattle native. Jerry Miller, the lead guitarist, is a Tacoma guy. Still lives in Tacoma. In fact, he lives, I think, about a block away from the house where he grew up. Other guys from Hollywood, from San Diego, and then the name most people would recognize is Skip Spence, Alexander Skip Spence, who is a Canadian from Windsor, Ontario. He would go on to release a solo album that has retrospectively been looked at as a cult classic. At the time, it was considered the lowest selling album in the history of Columbia Records. Now, Columbia Records signed Moby Grape. They were one of many major labels trying to get this band to sign on the line that is dotted because they were tearing up the Bay Area shortly after they formed. And the collective talent was incredible. You had 5 guys, all could play well, all could sing well, all wrote, all songwriters. Killer rhythm section, a lead guitarist in Jerry Miller, the Tacoma guy, who none other than Eric Clapton said at the time in the late 60s, best American rock guitarist, Jerry Miller. I don't think you need to say any more than that. These guys cut a debut album that was self-titled. It was released the same week as the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper, but this is where the story goes haywire for Moby Grape. Their record company was so of the belief that these guys were going to conquer the world, and with the talent they had, they should have, that they had the chutzpah to release 5 singles simultaneously from that album to radio. 5 singles. So 13 tracks on the LP, 10 of them came out simultaneously on 45 records, A and B sides, which was this grand gesture of confidence. So you had a double negative effect from that. One, radio programmers were like, what am I supposed to do in this? What am I supposed to play? You know, I can't play all Moby Grape on my radio. How am I supposed to choose? Yeah. So the result was none of them became hits because they all got lost in the shuffle. The other result, you're looking at an era, a time, and a culture. They're coming out of the counterculture in the Bay Area where that kind of hype was a big turnoff for a lot of music fans. And they were into integrity and, you know, against the man. Everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people saw this and just perceived Moby Grape to be this big record company hype rather than the amazing, talented group that they were. Now, despite all this, the record was still you'd have to say in general a success. It sold pretty well. It charted pretty high. They got played on underground radio. None of the singles became hits. Nothing. I think 81 was the highest charting, Omaha, which is probably the best known song off the record. So that was kind of the beginning of the end. They had a drug bust. They had a record release party that was a disaster for a number of reasons. Again, a lot to do with the record company hype, overblown. And this bust, all the guys were later acquitted, but it kind of gave them a bad reputation. Promoters started to be wary of them and not wanting to have them play their venues. And then they released a second record called Wow. And it was coupled with a second, so it was sold coupled with another record called Grape Jam. So the reason the Moby Grape, the first record, is still revered to this day, and if you read reviews of it, a lot of them say the same thing, hasn't dated a bit, which is very true. The reason it hasn't dated a bit is it's because it's very song-oriented. And a lot of the bands in the Bay Area at that time, 66, 67, 68, it was all about spacey jams and improvisation and long tracks, Grateful Dead, obviously the paragon of that. And this record, boom, boom, they're just hitting you with songs. And a lot of them are barely 2 minutes long. They get in and they get out. They do their thing and they're done. And then they go on to the next one. And you've got all these varied influences coming in there. Rock, R&B, blues, country. Very eclectic group. A lot of different influences. But just one great song, beautifully played, beautifully recorded, beautifully produced, one after the other, but pretty basic. It's the whole record is pretty much recorded live in the studio. Now you get to the Wow record. So I said Moby Grape's first album released same time as Sgt. Pepper's. They started recording Wow late 67, early 68, released in early 68. And this is a different proposition. It's a much more heavily produced album. You got, the first record, there's like little sprinklings of psychedelic effects on it, but not much, very subtle. They bring in a lot more studio technology on Wow. They bring in strings in the arrangements. They bring in horns in some of the arrangements, different effects produced in the studio, psychedelic or otherwise. But you still get this great variety of songs from these different songwriters and singers, and still a lot of amazing music on that record. But it was considered a big disappointment because it was not short, snappy, immediate pop songs.
More produced, less raw.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it was judged unfairly because of that. And then I particularly look at that record in comparison to a record like Love's Forever Changes, which is now this universally revered classic album. And that was Love's third album, released late 67. Same deal, very Baroque, lots of string arrangements by David Angel, horns, mariachi horns, all this stuff thrown into the mix. And that album is universally revered and loved, while even now, retrospectively, they still dog Moby Grape's Wow. Now, the Grape Jam album might have had something to do with it, because that was their concession to the more contemporary style of music coming out of the Bay Area, the jam stuff. So they released a whole record of just studio improv jamming. And they had a couple of extra guys in the studio helping him do it. A lot of people don't know this. Mike Bloomfield, who was the first American rock guitar hero out of the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, those first two classic albums, the self-titled album East West. And then he went on to form Electric Flag, which was a rock and horn band which predated Chicago. Amazing blues player, troubled guy, died young, it was a horrible junkie for years, almost forgotten today, which is, he was a pioneering guitar player. So he's in the studio helping them. And then Al Cooper, who was this Zelig figure in 60s and 70s music, just pops up everywhere on the Dylan record, on Like a Rolling Stone. He's the guy playing the organ. There's the whole story about how he snuck into the studio and just kind of improvised this organ bit that's not his instrument. He's a guitar player. And he's like, he doesn't know the track. It's a typical Bob Dylan session where the musicians are just like, all right, let's follow Bob. Let's see where he's going. Spontaneous. And he's like behind the beat the whole song.
But it's kind of the backbone of the song, though. I mean,
you couldn't imagine the song without it.
Without it, yeah.
And the producer, Tom Wilson, was savvy enough to realize that, and Bob Dylan as well. Bob Dylan's, no, keep that organ.
Yeah.
So Al Cooper is on that session. Now, those who are of a generation a little older than us, the Bloomfield Cooper Still Super Session album was a massive hit record in the 60s. That came out later. This was the first album of its type. Just guys jamming in the studio. But I've listened to it once. Nobody really loves that record. It's just, it's okay. The jams just don't really go anywhere that interesting.
They had to do it so they could name their album Grape Jam. I mean, it only makes sense.
But I think Wow gets underrated because of it. It's like an anchor pulling it down even farther. So you got the people dogging it for the production, and then the fact that it's with this Grape Jam album, it's written off. This album is so due for reappraisal, in my opinion. I'm not going to put it on the same level as their first record, but I think it for what it is a great record. I love it. I've been listening to it nonstop. And like I said, due for reappraisal. And this band is sadly underappreciated, underrecognized, practically unknown by people our age and younger, and they should have been the American Led Zeppelin. They were that gifted.
I was ready to say that I didn't like this album because I appreciate the first album. I get that it's a total classic. It's not exactly my style. Like, I don't love it or anything, but I think I do understand that it's a really good album. And when we were talking about WoW just yesterday, I think, I believe I said I don't like it.
You did say that. You did say that.
So then I started going through and listening to it again, and I was like, well, actually, I do. There's this one song I really like called He that sounds like it could have been on the soundtrack to Head, the Monkees album Head.
Now this is this is a Peter Lewis composition. Peter Lewis, one of the three guitar players, and that's another pioneering thing. Moby Grape and Buffalo Springfield, the three guitar attack. Peter Lewis, his role as a guitarist, he was a very accomplished finger picker, like folk finger pick guitar, beautiful work. And then his songs, I think if you're a Neil Young fan, they're kind of in that same vein. A lot of his songs, kind of that same vibe.
Yeah,
he is a.
That's
beautiful
why I really
song.
Like this song, because the guitar is gorgeous on it, and it's.
And do you know, the guitar interplay with the bass at the is such a beautiful piece of music, and it really it sounds a lot like metal era Pink Floyd. Kind of has that vibe for me.
Yeah. So I was like, well, I really like that song, and then I really like the song "Rose-Colored Eyes" and "Bitter
beautiful,
Wind."
haunting song. Yeah.
So I think what I'm realizing is that I actually like this album better than their first album. I appreciate the strings.
There's a turnaround.
I think the strings really lift it and add a lot to it. I think
the strings and the horns are beautifully deployed and recorded across the board.
Yep.
Yeah.
And initially, my turnoff of this album were the Jerry Miller songs, which are kind of the blues based kind of good. There's one that's called Miller's Blues. I think it's just a long guitar jam, but
he can let rip with the best of them.
Yeah, he can. So it actually, the more I listened to it, I was like, okay, these songs are not a deterrent to me. You know, they're good songs. It's just I don't really necessarily like that genre as much. But the other songs I really enjoy. I think they're great. And I agree with you that this album needs to be reassessed. Also, Moby Grape's stuff is not available on Spotify. You can't, there's some songs you can stream on both the albums. For some reason, that not all the songs are available. But
I think their third album's Moby Grape 69, which actually came out in 68, the end of 68. I believe that entire album is available for streaming. But
and the collection. The Moby Grape collection, which does have a lot of songs from WoW on it, but not all of them.
But not the vintage collection. The vintage collection has the first album in its entirety. This is if you're curious about Moby Grape, seek out this collection. It's a double disc called Vintage. It came out on Columbia Legacy in the 90s, early 90s, mid 90s, and it was available for a long time. It's no longer in print. But it shouldn't be that hard to track down a used copy at a reasonable price. But it's a beautiful mastering job, probably the best this music's going to sound on CD. And it has the entire first album on it, on the first disc. So I've been hammering the second disc of this collection. Now, the reason I bring this up, I've never actually listened to the WoW album start to finish. I've listened to the tracks that are on the Vintage collection. So they leave off like the lead track, which you said is one of your favorites, The Place and the Time. I like
it, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's not on Vintage. And then there's a track called 3-4. And then the last two tracks of the album, Miller's Blues, is on Vintage in a live recording, which just is killer, I think. And then Naked If I Want To, which is I don't know why that's on the album, because it was on their first album. It's this short, goofy little Jerry Miller song, which I think is cute. I haven't heard the version that's on WoW. So I'm basing my judgment of this album based on the tracks they put on the Vintage collection.
There's a great Skip Spence song on that album too, Motorcycle Irene.
Oh yeah, Skip Spence. So again, I don't want to spend too much time on Moby Grape, use up the whole show. But the reason this band deserves a biopic is primarily because of him and what became of him, which is very sad.
Yeah,
because he was a gifted musician. He was really the spark in the band. This incredible source of energy, this impish persona. And he had an incredible way with words. And I think of John Lennon. He really loved wordplay and puns. And Motorcycle Irene is a good example of it. It's a very risque song. And he's kind of getting away with it just because he's so clever with his lyrics. It's a song about a promiscuous biker chick who meets a grisly demise, with very, very detailed sound effects at the end of the record. By the way, the sound of the motorcycle crashing, they really went out of their way to get the detail in that sound effect.
Right.
It's just another
really
reason.
Cool song, though. I love the music to that song. Yeah,
but because the band is great. These guys who were thrown together, basically created by the manager Matthew Katz, who is the evil antagonist in the biopic. Which, please God, somebody make a movie. But the reason Moby Grape's music is unavailable is primarily due to his, bitter recriminations after they cut ties with him. And they've been battling this guy for decades ever since. They got their music re-released briefly back in 2007 on Sundays. All the albums re-released with bonus tracks. And then they were almost immediately pulled off the market. And now they're highly collectible and hard to find. But that is... all the record stores I enter now, it's the first thing I look for is go to the M section, see if I can. And I actually found their self-titled disc at a regular used CD price at a local store here in town. I mean, you look on Discogs, they're going for $70 or more sometimes. It's ridiculous.
Well, if we get a copy of WoW in, I'll let you know.
Yes. Well, I know you've got one in that.
Actually, I do have one here, yeah.
Very jealous. I'm going to ask Santa Claus to bring me a copy of WoW for Christmas.
Okay. I also would really highly recommend seeking out Skip Spence, or it is on Spotify, and it's more readily available. But if anybody who's a fan of like Leonard Cohen, Syd Barrett, Scott Walker, like his vocal style is very similar to Leonard Cohen and Scott Walker. It's a homespun, self-made recording. He plays all the instruments. It's definitely worth listening to, seeking out, and checking it out.
And the Skip Spence story in a nutshell, he had mental difficulties. He had a breakdown in which he was trying to murder members of the band while they were recording their second album in New York. He was institutionalized after being arrested. And then once he got out of the institution, the apocryphal story is got an advance from the record company, hopped on a motorcycle, went down to Nashville, recorded this album, all the parts himself, all the musical parts, all the vocal parts himself. Maybe the first rock album ever to do that, by the way.
Yeah, it predated McCartney.
Right. That's another. I've never seen any citation of that being the first, or if there was one before that, what it is. And then that was it for him, basically. I mean, he would resurface occasionally, but he spent most of the rest of his life living on the streets in and out of state care, and then died young of lung cancer. I mean, it's really sad story. One of the 60s casualties. But like I said, I could talk forever about this group. But we don't want to waste the whole show on it. We got to start adding to our playlist here. So 2 songs from 74 that we're going to plug in there. I guess we'll start with the more familiar one. Wasn't as big a hit in 74 as Rock You Baby by George McRae, but Steve Miller's The Joker, probably more widely recognized now by people of all generations. It's still played all the time. You still hear it everywhere. Steve Miller's great hooks in that song. And this, for Steve Miller, this was his breakthrough record. He'd been around. I mean, 74, the first Steve Miller Band album came out in 68, and they were kind of late to sign their record deal too. So part of the same San Francisco scene as Moby Grape and the other bands I mentioned. Steve Miller, not from the Bay Area, born in Milwaukee. Ray spent a lot of his childhood in Dallas. Child of privilege, son of a surgeon, and his father was also amateur recording technician. He had like all the latest technology in recording, tape decks that nobody had back in the early 50s, and he became friends with all these famous musicians who would come around the house.
Les Paul and Mary Ford.
Yeah, a lot of blues guys. And Steve Miller got to learn at the feet of these legendary musicians, and then eventually formed bands, relocated to San Francisco, and that scene started popping. The Steve Miller Blues Band, like I said, their first record in 68, Children of the Future. They had a run of really good albums in the 60s. like Moby Grape, they kind of were set apart from those other San Francisco bands. They were very musically accomplished, driving rhythm section, music that you got up and danced to rather than spaced out to and long jams. They were more blues and R&B based, but never had any hits. They sold respectable amounts of albums. By the early 70s, they were kind of drifting off the charts and being forgotten about. By 74, he was this journeyman musician, still on Capitol Records. If you watched episode 1, we talked about Don McLean a lot and his personality, iconoclast. Steve Miller, kind of one of those same types. Had his stuff together, wasn't, this spaced out, drugged out rocker. Had his business acumen, smart guy, had his house in order, constantly battling with his record label. So the Joker album gets released late 73. He never thought he had a big hit single on his hands. It was a song that he worked on, he liked, had hooks. I think the biggest hook would have to be that, the rip, the guitar. Yeah. Guitars sliding the fingers down the fretboard, creating, making his guitar talk. And then just the way the song kind of stumbles into being is cool, sets it apart, where it just kind of gets right into that verse. And then all the self-referential stuff, which a lot of people probably didn't pick up on, unless you were a big Steve Miller fan. You didn't know what he was going on about. Some people call me the Space Cowboy. Some people call me the Gangster of Love. Some people call me Maurice. Those were references to other songs that he'd recorded prior. Gangster of Love is actually a cover. Johnny Guitar Watson says the first song he really learned to jam out on guitar to. And then Space Cowboy was off their third record, Brave New World. Really good album. Paul McCartney plays on 2 tracks on the album, by the way. And then Maurice, I think there was a song called Anna Maurice on one of his early 70s records. Not a lot of people have heard those albums. In fact, 2 of them you can't even get on CD. They've never been officially released on CD. Rock Love and Recall the Beginning, A Journey to Eden. Any CD you find of those is a bootleg. They've never been officially released. Strange. So he's kind of like Fleetwood Mac. There's parallels there. Fleetwood Mac had been around. They'd had their day in the sun in England primarily. They were more underground in the USA. And around 74, they were this journeyman group. They toured all the time. People, rock fan, you'd hear them on like FM, underground radio, but not a hit group. And Steve Miller and Fleetwood Mac kind of at the same time made this jump into more commercial sounding music. He recorded the Joker out. He kind of a new band behind him. And I've seen interviews. Unfortunately, there's no really good documentary about the Steve Miller Band, or at least I haven't seen it. So basically, he's meeting with his record company, plays this song. One of the young guys, one of the promotion guys, hey, I think that Joker's a hit. And he's like, you know what? I doubt it, but I'm not concerned about hits. Just make sure I'm going out on tour. Just please, for the love of God, make sure that my records are in the record stores when I play these places so people can buy my freaking albums, you idiots. Just do your jobs. He's kind of got that personality. Again, he's a little abrasive to some. But then out of nowhere, the Joker just becomes this huge hit record. It's number 1 on the charts. And then he takes some time off. And basically, the Joker being a hit allowed Steve Miller to be Steve Miller. I'm in control of everything. You do what I tell you to do at the record company. You stay out of my business. You take your business, all the recording stuff. I don't need any input from anybody else. He recorded these 2 albums pretty much simultaneously. Fly Like an Eagle and Book of Dreams. Fly Like an Eagle had been floating around for a few years. If you look on YouTube, there's performance clips from Don Kirshner's rock concert and Midnight Special 3 years before that was released. He was messing around with that. But
pretty much every song from Steve Miller Band's greatest hits is from
2 albums.
Fly Like an Eagle and Book of Dreams.
Only
except
one
the song The Joker.
The Joker is the only song not off those 2 albums on the greatest hits. And we all know any rock fan with any kind of collection has got that. Has got Steve Miller's greatest hits in there.
Oh yeah,
it's ubiquitous.
Mm-hmm.
But the song was a hit for a reason. It's got hooks. It's catchy.
It's so catchy.
It's fun. It's laid back. It's good
It's got
time
a fun
music.
singable. It has a singable chorus, which seems to be kind of one of those prerequisites for a song that just has longevity and continues, to be popular.
And it's a hit on the pop charts, but it's got that pot reference that for the rock heads, the FM guys. I'm a toker. Oh, we all know what that means.
Yeah.
Maybe Grandma didn't catch on, but she'd sing along anyway. And boom, it's a big hit, and still many people's favorite song. And one he is required to play at all his shows. He still tours all the time. And again, it's like Don McLean. You get one big hit record. He's in control of his publishing. He's in control of everything. And now he gets to do the whole thing on his terms. And then after the next two records were huge hits, several number one records, singles, big album sales. Basically, he gets to cruise the rest of his life and do it on his own terms.
One of the things I really like about the Joker, if you go online and watch, and a lot of these are newer clips, but it's a great song. I love the song. I love the slide guitar.
Yep.
But he does a lot of acoustic versions. You can find online him doing it, just him acoustic, and it's still as great of a song because the guitar is actually really cool. In a picking form, when he does it acoustically.
He's a really good live performer. And even years after he stopped having hits, I remember when I was in college, they played. Do you remember the early years of the Gorge Amphitheater? What a zoo!
I saw
what a
that
zoo that was!
Yes,
those early concerts were absolute bedlam because people could bring as much alcohol as they wanted in there, and it was nuts. But he was one of the early big acts to play the Gorge, in my recollection, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yep.
That was a huge, but again, we're fast forwarding ahead in time here. We should probably refrain from talking too much because I think we'll probably have more Steve Miller on our playlist before all is said and done. But I mean, really, the biggest show of that era, the biggest touring concert of that era, had to have been Steve Miller Band and the Eagles with Pablo Cruz opening. I mean,
oh yeah,
wow! I mean, they were all at their commercial peaks. This is the Eagles after Hotel California, Steve Miller after Fly Like an Eagle and Book of Dreams. And then Pablo Cruz had some big hits on AM radio at that time. I mean, that was a huge stadium tour. But Steve Miller still tours a lot and occasionally releases records to this day. But the Joker got it all started. And, there's a lot of Steve Miller Band fans only know him from the greatest hits. And then you've got others who prefer the 60s Steve Miller Band. I like them both quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that they both have their merits for sure. But I definitely know the greatest hits, or those two albums, or those three albums, I guess, Joker, Book of Dreams, and Fly Like an Eagle more.
Yeah, you couldn't have gotten away from that music. And then I know I'm not alone I think he's got a particular fan base in the Pacific Northwest that he connected with just by referencing Tacoma in the song Rockin' Me.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, he lived here for a while.
He lived in Seattle.
On Mercer Island.
He lived in Seattle, and he also had a spread down in Southern Oregon for a while and built a recording studio there. I think now he lives in Idaho, if I'm not mistaken. Ketchum, Idaho. Anyhow, so that's one of the songs on our playlist. The other one you're going to find as we go along here, particularly during this time period, that I was a little disco kid back then. Now, I've talked about my earliest musical memories, my dad being a radio guy and bringing home these radio shows and listening to the music of this era on these radio shows. This song would have been on those records, but it didn't connect with me as a youngster. I didn't come to this song until much later, and it's Rock Your Baby by George McRae. Now, I was a huge Casey and the Sunshine Band fan as a kid. Again, spoiler alert, there will be Casey and the Sunshine Band, one song from on a later episode on our playlist. This is before anybody knew about Casey and the Sunshine Band, really. They hadn't any big hits yet. They came out of Florida, Miami area. TK Records was the label they recorded for. And this is the earliest days of disco starting to bubble up and become a thing. Harry Wayne Casey and Richard Finch, they're kind of the brains behind Casey and the Sunshine Band, keyboard player and a bassist. They both worked for TK Records in the studio. And they were messing around with this track. They'd released a couple of singles, I think, at this point that hadn't been big hits, maybe on the R&B charts, but not on the pop charts. They recorded this track, and they loved it, and they presented it to the label owner, Henry Stone. And Harry Casey, he's the KC of Casey and the Sunshine Band, tried to sing it, but the key was too high for him. It didn't suit his voice. So you had this. They were basically working on a session for a female recording artist named Gwen McRae. Her husband George, also a musician. They had done stuff together as a duo. At this point, George is kind of her manager. He's still doing like sessions, backup vocalists, performing in clubs in the Palm Beach area. He happened to be hanging around. Gwen was gone for whatever reason. It's her session, but she had departed. It was like 1 or 2 in the morning or something. And they listened to this track, and the label owner loves the track. Casey can't really hit the notes. He's like, well, have George cut it, and see how it sounds. He can hit. He's got a high voice. And at this point, the track is still pretty much a demo. It's got a primitive drum machine on it.
Drum machine, yeah.
Kind of basic keyboard sounds and really some cool guitar work on there. So they go back and they pull George into the studio, have him cut the vocal. They bring it back to Henry Stone. He's like, "That's it. That's a record. I'm releasing it."
It's a hit.
And I think Casey and Finch are probably,
it's just a demo.
It's a demo, really. And if you listen to it, it sounds like a demo, but it's got a certain vibe to it that just works.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the full-on disco production that Casey and the Sunshine Band would become known for later. It's more simplistic, more basic, raw. Not a whole lot of bottom end on it, but it's kind of got the primitive drum machine, and it really set it apart. You didn't hear a lot of that. So Sly Stone had messed around with these drum machines. Family Affair, you can hear it on there. That predated this. Actually, I think the first use of a drum machine on a record that was a hit was Robin Gibb of the Bee Gees. It was a song called Saved by the Bell. It was a hit in England, not in the USA. And then Sly cut a record with his sister. I can't remember the name of the song, but she recorded as Little Sister. Sly Stone was the producer and played on the record. That was a minor hit in the USA, but it was still kind of an unusual sound for a record during this time period. But George McRae's voice on those high notes it's just such a smooth vocal performance. And disco would become known for these big, lavish productions with strings and horn sections, multiple percussionists, sometimes multiple guitarists, 20, 30-piece band. I mean, the whole perception of disco is being mechanical, and it's kind of a misnomer, at least in the early days of disco. It was like the last stages of big band music. You had these huge orchestra, like Barry White's records. You go back to 71 with Isaac Hayes, you could make a claim the theme from Shaft is the first disco record. That's got all kinds of stuff going on it with strings and horns. But you see the elements that would become disco there in that song. This was very primitive, but it was a massive, massive hit, not just in the USA. I believe it hit number 1 on the charts in 51 different countries. And then,
wow.
George McRae at his time in the Sun, he cut another, he didn't have any big hits other than this. There was a song called I Get Lifted, which is more of a hard funk track. It was really cool. I don't know a lot of his other music, but by the end of he put it on an album. The album sold pretty well. I think he only had 2 albums that made the charts, and then he would basically, by the end of the 70s, he was done. He'd faded away. But this song was just a massive hit worldwide. I think it sold over 11 million copies. And
he was just in the right place at the right time.
The great stories
to record this song.
There is so much that goes into having a hit record, and a lot of it is just pure luck and serendipity. Yeah. He was in the right place at the right time. It's like, hey, George, you sing high. I can't hit these notes. Why don't you give it a shot? Next thing you know, he's a star. Now, if you look at the performance clips on YouTube, they're all lip sync with just goofy, corny 70s effects behind him. I couldn't see anything of him singing live from the era. But this song is just.
But it is his voice. It is his voice that really, really lifts the song and brings brings it to a point that it stands out.
Woman, take me.
Yeah,
and this,
it's so smooth.
A lot of disco's about dancing, but a lot of it is sex too. I mean, it's undeniable. Yeah. And this is
one of those songs.
I'm pretty sure this song soundtracked a lot of future births. I'm pretty sure this was playing on the stereo when mom and dad were getting it on back in 73, 74 for a lot of people born in that era.
Yeah.
Well, you could
But
say that a lot.
it was a highly influential song though too. And I think apparently John Lennon said that while he was writing Whatever Gets You Through the Night, he was listening to the song. And so I was trying to kind of understand the parallels there. I was like, oh, I don't really get it. But then if you
Melodically,
go back and listen,
yeah.
well, if you go back and listen to the demo version that's on the John Lennon anthology, there you understand. It really sounds like it's much slower groove to it, and it does have a very similar sound and feel. I was like, oh, okay, now I get where that came from. And apparently too, ABBA Dancing Queen, they say that they were influenced by this song in writing that.
Yeah. Dancing Queen, one of the biggest hits of the disco era. And then Miami would become this recording mecca at this point in time. I mean, you already had a few hits that were cut, like Timmy Thomas, We Can Live Together. I can't remember the name of it. I love this song. Again, very primitive. Just and I think that had just a drum machine in the background too, organ and drum machine. But, Derek and the Dominoes recorded Layla there. That's going back to 1970 at Criteria Studios in Miami. And then all of a sudden you had all kinds of people flocking to Miami. And then Casey and the Sunshine Band later in the year, and then particularly in 75, they blow up. They were, people forget how massive they were. They had 5 number one hit records and a number 2 in the mid and late 70s. But so one of the disco epicenters would be Miami. And this was one of the songs, the very earliest days of disco that was very groundbreaking and influential, as you mentioned. And still to this day, very enjoyable listening, and certainly not going to put a damper on any party. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think it fits in the playlist.
All right. So we're up to 5 songs in the playlist. And before we part ways, I think we got to pick our favorite albums from 74. It's an unusual year for albums for me because a lot of the big rock acts didn't release records that year. No Zeppelin, no Pink Floyd, no Who albums came out that year. And I was looking down my collection and I was like, it kind of surprised me. I've got all these 74 albums, but very few of them do I know that well. So, some I've barely listened to, some I haven't listened to. One I've been getting into lately, though, is Queen 2, the second Queen album. And Queen is a funny band because they're one of the most eclectic rock bands ever. So many different things going on in Queen's recording career, but their earliest records, they were heavy, man. I mean, they were a heavy band. And Queen 2, you've got real heavy music, a lot of psychedelic stuff on there. And then you start to see the elements of what Queen would become, the kind of the operatic stuff.
The more theatrical feel.
The massed harmonies, the heavy production. It's not a good sounding record as a result. So we're still talking about primitive recording here. And they're overdubbing ad infinitum. So it doesn't sound that good, the record. But, man, side 1, which is it's kind of a kind of a conceptual record. The White Side is primarily Brian May's work. He did a lot of the songwriting in there, and then Freddie Mercury's songs are primarily on the second side. The Black Side, a little darker. The Black Side opens with Ogre Battle, which retrospectively very influential on speed metal and hardcore punk. You were really hearing that kind of dark, heavy, fast guitars like that. I mean, it was pretty early on for that, although that's only segments of Ogre Battle. A lot of it would lapse into more what we recognize with Queen is these kind of Baroque operatic melodies and vocals. But Brian May, really some killer stuff on side 1 of that album.
I love the White Side.
Father to Son is this epic track. After the intro, which is this really cool guitar effect, Queen would trumpet at that time. No synths. They got a lot of interesting sounds out of guitars. Brian May, we know, is this, he's got these advanced degrees. He's a scientist, build his own. Yeah, exactly. Really brilliant guy. Built his own guitars and effects. Got a lot of cool sounds, and he was a killer guitar player. And then you look at vintage live clips from that era. It's just mind-blowing how good these guys were on stage. Freddie Mercury in particular. What an amazing vocalist. Yeah. Maybe you can easily make a claim he's the greatest rock vocalist of them all, based on pure technical ability, range, and power. And they nailed every note live. It's just amazing to me. But this is a record a lot of Queen fans.
I was just going to say,
familiar.
I haven't listened. Yeah, I really hadn't listened to this album. And until we started talking about it. And actually, I think it's probably I don't know, I'm not a huge Queen fan, but right now it's my favorite Queen album.
Yeah. Oh, for me, for sure.
Especially the
Yeah,
white
absolutely.
side, the Brian May side. And I didn't realize that he wrote so much of, I don't know
Yeah,
how
me
much
neither.
he wrote for the band actually as time went on. And maybe it was more Freddie Mercury heavy after when they started having more hits.
They all wrote and 3 of them sang. I didn't really have the
Well, I know Roger Taylor wrote and sang too, and he does have one song on the white side as well. But he always kind of seemed to me like the George Harrison of the band. Like there'd be 1 or 2 songs that they'd throw in every album of his, but
he was more the straight ahead rocker of the 3.
Yeah.
Brian May definitely had a good melodic sense. In fact, Someday, One Day, again, I'm still really learning this album. I haven't absorbed it all yet. That's a beautiful song. It's just I kind of think of Spirit from that turn of the 70s era when I hear that song. Just a beautiful production, and he's a fine singer. But great record. And then that was kind of just really their first 2 albums had that sound, and then they started getting wild with all the the Queen, the elements of Queen that most of us recognize now came later.
Yeah,
I think that start to see it here.
You start to hear it a little bit on the Black Side on Freddie Mercury's songs after Ogre Battle. That one definitely is more heavy, but then as the Black Side goes on, you start to get more of that theatrical prog meets theater kind of feeling that would be more prominent on their albums to come. But
I think it would be fair to characterize this album as prog metal, a lot of it.
And, I think so.
Yeah, that was kind of the end of that after this. I mean, occasionally we would return to that, but for the most part, this was the end of the line for that. And I'm really loving this record.
Yeah, I am too. So actually the album I chose for 74, I think could maybe fit a little bit into the prog vein, but more like how a Pink Floyd would fit into prog. And it's Supertramp Crime of the Century.
Ooh, Supertramp. There we go.
So this is an album that I've loved and been very familiar with since high school. It kind of fed right into that angsty teenage mind at that time for me. And I feel like it's sort of a more mature, kind of less whiny version of The Wall, of Pink Floyd The Wall. Because it does have a lot of the same themes and as far as the lyrical content goes. At the time, I mean, that album did have a few hits. Dreamer, which everybody probably knows that song from the radio, and Bloody Well Right were both from that album.
They're using Dreamer on a commercial nowadays. I couldn't tell you what it's for, but I've heard it on a TV commercial. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's still a popular song. School is a song that you often hear on FM radio.
Remember hearing that on KISW?
So the album is actually kind of split between 2 of the primary songwriters and vocalists in that band, Rick Davies and Roger Hodgson. Roger Hodgson's the one that has the higher voice that is more familiar to a lot of people because a lot of the hits were sung by him, written by him. Take the Long Way Home, and he's the dreamer, but they both are great songwriters and vocalists. And that's one of the things I really like about this album is that you get the 2 really different sounding vocals,
right?
That the interplay between the 2, sometimes on the same songs, really makes this album stand out. I think it's kind of like the Caravan album, the same sort of thing where you get the 2 vocalists. I love that, and they really do it well on Crime of the Century because they, as songwriters and vocalists, they have their own distinct style. I mean, it's not the most popular Supertramp album. Breakfast in America would definitely be the most popular because it had the most hits for them. It's definitely a well-known album. In fact, I think it's the first album that Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab put out in their master recordings, and it sounds great.
Yes, considered a primo recording, whereas Breakfast in America, not so much. Although Breakfast in America has the more recognizable pop hits on it. Yeah, Crime of the Century. Safe to say, the Supertramp fan, the connoisseur's choice, probably of all their albums.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but I know it is definitely mine because it works so well as an album. The whole album together. It's one of those that you just want to put on headphones and just sit there for 45 minutes and listen to it all the way through, and it all works you can pull out a few songs that you recognize from it that did work as singles too. But overall, I think just the whole album is great. And I think that it's probably one of my favorite albums of all time.
Well, I have to admit, I've never listened to the album other than the songs that you mentioned that were hits and FM hits. Dreamer, Bloody Well Right was a two-sided single. I have that 45. I've had it for years. And then School that you would hear on FM rock radio. I was a huge Supertramp fan as a kid, still am, of the Breakfast in America era in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Roger Hodgson, the higher singer, he had more of the hits were his. Yeah. But I do love Richard Davies as well. In fact, my favorite, if I had to pick one Supertramp song, it would be a Davies song, which we'll talk more about when we get to Breakfast in America. That would be Goodbye Stranger. But yeah, great band, great pop smarts. Like you said, love the contrast between Hodgson and Davies, the different songwriting styles, the different vocal styles. Definitely an album that I've not come around to, but will eventually, for sure.
You got a lot of listening to do.
I know.
So do I.
I know. I got enough music to last me the rest of my life, but that's the great thing about music. It's
me too.
You'll never, in 10 lifetimes, you won't get to all the good music out there. You know? You just got to keep plugging away. And that's what we're helping you do here, is try and find the best of it. So to recap, we've added 2 more songs to our playlist from 1974, Steve Miller Band's The Joker and George McRae's Rock Your Baby. We got 2 more songs to come from 74, but we're going to have to wait for another episode for that. And this is exciting because Sheryl and I will get to pick our favorite songs from the year 74, and they both turn out to be big hits as well. So, and we'll be talking about plenty more when our next episode rolls around. But until then, you've been listening to Matt and Sheryl's GenExcellent playlist. I'm Matt.
I'm Sheryl.
And thanks for joining us. Talk to you later.